Hey everybody, it's Joshua from the Basketball Boys podcast here with our very first episode where we're going to be going over the 2024 NBA draft and giving it many grades for each team. This is taking place about 2 weeks after the draft, so we're middle into the summer league right now. So we're seeing how these prospects really work out. And we're going to go team by team in alphabetical order. Starting off with the number one. Yeah, yeah, I'll be here with you. It is a C plus trade for the Hawks. Yes, Reese Shea is not the best player. Let's admit that. That is a very, very easy choice. But also, Sarr was hard to get. He didn't want to play for Atlanta. He wanted to play for Washington. It's kind of a rough put to make, but they do get Nikola Vucevic, who has been talked of as an Anthony Edwards, that's taller. I don't really like the comparison too much. That's kind of his comparison as well. But in all reality, I just can't seem to ignore the possibility that Reese Shea could blossom. This is now a week after the Dejounte Murray trade as well, so we do have to see where he plays into the roster, but he could fill into that spot. Do I think the Hawks are a play-in team again? Probably. They don't go too far though. This trade doesn't really do. This draft doesn't really do much. Our next team is the Boston Celtics, who actually drafted two players. One is the last pick in the draft, Baylor Scheierman from Creighton, and then Anton Watson in the second round. I'm giving this an A minus grade. Baylor Sherman is a complete steal. I have watched this man's season in Creighton all year long. He's an amazing player. He guided Creighton all the way through a very, very strong Big East team, and he is to be watched about. He is the next Peyton Pritchard. He is the next, any white shooter you think about in the Celtics history, honestly. He is the perfect three-point shooter. You can put him literally anywhere on the court, and he has size and he has strength. Anton Watson, I'll be real with you, he should have been drafted, but you give and you take with some people. He could definitely find himself working his way up from the G League into the Celtics roster in years to come. Next is the Brooklyn Nets, the only team who actually has not drafted in 2024, and this is because of the James Harden trade, the Kevin Garnett trade that removed all of their major picks for the time being. And while the thing is, they should get an F in this scenario because obviously they draft, but they're getting a C minus because of the trades they made right before that. Obviously the Cal Bridges trade getting 5 first round draft picks, kind of a steal if you ask me, and that's really, really good for Mikal Bridges' value. And then on top of that, they had pick swaps with Houston Rockets. So they're kind of getting away with it, but a C minus grade is worthwhile because they really could have gotten someone else, even in the second rounds, because the roster does need work. It is still a very young core surrounding Cam Thomas, and more players is really, well, what's necessary. Next is the Charlotte Hornets, who I'm giving a B minus. This is mostly because Tejan Saloon hasn't really shown himself to be a top 10 pick, which is why I was surprised they took him at 7. There really were a bunch of other people he could have had. Modest Buzel was still on the board. Dalton was still on the board. Really, anybody could have been on the board at that level. And you chose Tejan. I'm not crazy about him. And same thing with KJ Simpson. He's just 6 foot. He really doesn't have the level of size that a team needs, like the Charlotte Hornets. And the team is not too tall. I'll be real. But it's not a bad choice. They could do better. Are they a playing team with this? Probably not. But I get to see how they do. Next is Chicago Bulls, giving them an A. This is a very, very simple one. Modest Bucelis at 11 is a complete steal. He is such a good player. He should have been number 1 last year if he chose to do it last. Well, not what I mean to say. I just mean to say that this time last year he was number 1. And if anything, oof, I think Chicago got a really good choice out of this, considering now that they've traded away DeMar for almost nothing, Caruso for almost nothing. Chicago needs something good. They need to build around a new star player. Modest could be that guy. Next, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers who picked Jalen Tyson out from California. I'm giving this a B. I'll be honestly generous with you. I've not seen Jalen Tyson's style of play. I don't know if it's like the last very good Cal player in Jalen Brown, but he could fit that mold. He is a very similar size, and he's a great three-point shooter. So that could definitely help with the guard play that Cleveland needs to get back into a good playoff spot. Next, we have Dallas Mavericks, who just really collected one player. That's Melvin Jinka, 51. Nothing crazy. Just see he hasn't had any major, combine or any other sorts of scouting that's given him a good point. Nothing necessarily bad about it, but the team doesn't really need any drafted players right now to help with the roster. The roster is always very well made, and building pieces around Luka is always necessary. But this year, not necessarily really good, but also they didn't have any choices. Next year, the Denver Nuggets, who actually traded with Phoenix Suns for a higher up draft pick to collect De'Ron Holmes II, a great center out of Dayton University. Obviously, you know, Obi Toppin was from there, so it's a very similar type of story. Dayton did great this year for a non-Power 5 school, and it shows with De'Ron Holmes, who was an All-American for All NCAA. And he's good. He's a little short for the NBA standards, but he worked perfectly behind Nikola Jokic, who does need minutes on the break end as he is getting older. He's going to be approaching 30 soon, and the core needs more depth. If it wants to get to the place it was 2 years ago, it needs the depth to get out of the second rounds. Next on our list is actually the Detroit Pistons, and I'm giving this one a B. I'm not really surprised the Pistons didn't draft anybody crazy good because they really do. They did get Ron Holland at 5, which is something I expected. And they probably could have chosen Modest. Modest would have been like an A. But Ron Holland's not a horrible choice either. He definitely fills a good mold of the guard play that Detroit typically uses. His offense is great. His defense is iffy. So I don't expect the Detroit offense to really get much better. And the Detroit defense is not getting much better either, no offense. And then the second round, they picked up Bobby Klintman, who honestly could have been a first round pick, so I do consider him to be a steal. He is great. He will sit in the G League for like 2 years, but he will pop off in Detroit when the time comes. And watch out for that name, Bobby Klintman. Next to the Warriors, who drafted Quinton Post out of Boston College. This is a C. He'll run the center position behind really anybody, if he even does. He's a second round pick. I didn't expect him to get drafted. This is not a crazy grade, but also the Warriors weren't getting much with this pick. C. It's fair. Next, this is a big one. The Houston Rockets really won this draft with Reed Sheppard. And this is why I'm giving them an A minus. Reed had an amazing season at Kentucky. It is incredibly underestimated how good of a player he was. His combine showing was insane. And honestly, everyone kind of saw him coming number 3. He was more likely than Sarr or Risa Shea, if anything. I think he fits a perfect point in a team in the Houston Rockets. I think they can really get that push if Sheppard hits a good level and averages 10, 15 a year. He is easily top 5 player in this draft, and he should not be disrespected for that. Next is the Indiana Pacers, who actually drafted 3 players, all in the second round. This would be Johnny Furphy from Kansas, Tristan Newton from Connecticut, and Enrique Freeman from Akron. And honestly, I'm giving this a B plus because they could have traded some of these picks for a first round pick. There's no real reason to draft 3 second round picks when the team could use like 1 or 2 good players in the first round. The team is already very loaded as it was, making the conference finals as I think a 6th seed last year. Getting these players really only adds to shooting depth, if anything, because none of these players are really known for their defense, except for maybe Enrique Freeman, but he might be a G League player for some time. Furphy should slide into the lineup pretty well, and so should Newton, who has that championship level expertise coming from UConn. But if anything, I don't expect much from these players, so B plus is kind of where I'm getting at. Next is the Clippers, who I'm actually giving a high grade for. Typically, Clippers don't really do too well, but today, Clippers fans, enjoy yourself. You got the one and only Cam Christie. Max Christie's brother, plays in LA. They're living next to each other. It's going to be kind of a fun and wholesome story. He had a very under the radar season at Minnesota, and I give him a lot of respect for it. It's a lot of push to get him into this spot, and he's doing pretty good if you ask me. In getting there, he was a second round pick. I enjoy the steal because he could have been a first round pick if a little more time is necessary. Could he waited till next year and gone in? Probably. That'd probably been a better idea. But right now, he fits into the roster pretty well. You need another spot for PG. You can slot him in the back. He could do pretty well. Next is, well, it's the Lakers. And we can talk about Ronnie James all day long if you want to. And yeah, not the greatest pick, but also 55, you never really get anything good. The real steal, though, is Dalton at 17. He should not have failed the draft lottery. He is easily a top 3 player in this draft, and he can last another 10 to 15 years in this NBA. His style is amazing. His playmaking is amazing. And if it was not for Zach, he wouldn't play with the year. Like he really is a rag searcher story coming from JUCO to North Colorado to Tennessee. He put on a complete show for the SEC team, led them all the way to the lead, almost to the Final Four for the first time. This man has insane expertise. He is tall, he is strong, he dunks, he shoots incredibly well from three. He should not be ignored, and he's honestly a top. He's a starter. He's a starter. If the Lakers do not start him, they're not doing well. They're ignoring the possibility of making the playoffs this year if they don't start. That's my opinion. This is an A, easy A. Next, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, who also had a really good draft. They had three picks, one in the first round, that being Zach Edey at 9. A little bit of surprise. Most people didn't seem being a lottery pick, but he wound up there because of Don McClain being taken at 7. And then you have Cam Spencer and Jalen Wells from Washington State being in the bottom of the second round. And they fit a good mold as shooters. Cam Spencer is actually popping off right now in the G League, if you want to look at that in. And then Zach Edey. Everyone knows Zach Edey. But and yet, do we really know Zach Edey? In all reality, Zach had a lot of specialty with college, which obviously is the problem going to the NBA that everyone's been talking about, which is why this is getting like an A minus and not like an A plus. And the fact that his possibilities don't really go too far. Yes, he still has to learn the three ball, the mid range, but his ability as a 7'4", 300-pound center does not deny him anything at all. He will be a starting five player. He will work so well with Triple J, so well with Ja, so well with Desmond Bane. This is easily giving them an additional ranking of the seed list. This should easily could make them a playoff team next year. Next is Miami Heat, who kind of surprised me picking a center in Kel'el Ware at 15. Everyone really thought they were going to be picking like a guy like Dalton, who would have done amazing work here. So they're getting the B and not like the A. But I've seen how Kel'el Ware plays and how the move makes sense. And the thing is that obviously everyone's saying, oh, Bam is a center. Bam is a center that's going to be sticking around. The thing is, though, Kel'el Ware at the 5 moves Bam to the 4. Bam plays the 4 pretty well. A power forward like him can make the same moves that he was doing at center, makes him shoot the free ball a little bit more, which is actually doing pretty good. With he's shot a career high threes last season, and he can continue to do that more often, which I think helps a lot. Will Kel'el Ware fit defeat Heat culture? I don't really know. It's hard to say. And then from Arizona was Pele Larson in the second round. He definitely could. I've seen his playmaking, very strong. He never really got the minutes he deserved in Arizona's team. He'll probably be in the G League for a few years, but this is a low key steal. He can definitely make his way up in coming years. Next is the Bucks, who I'll be real with you, they lost the draft. They without a doubt lost draft. The Bucks don't really get a lot of draft picks as they are, and they never really develop them. Look at Marjon Beauchamp, who actually really looks at these people anymore. Bucks do need young talent because Giannis is getting older. Brook Lopez might be traded. Chris Middleton's getting older. We obviously lost a lot of the old core that made this 2021 team the national champions for the NBA. And they didn't really do too well. AJ Johnson at 23 was not really the best pick. A first round pick for AJ Johnson isn't really something that helps the team get anywhere when AJ Johnson was most likely a second round pick with not much core going into him. He didn't really have the same level of experience that their teams had. And then picking with Tyler Smith is not that crazy of a difference too. His strength, his height is good, and he could have been a first round pick, so that's why they don't get like a D. But Tyler Smith didn't really fit the mold I also saw in Milwaukee. They could have used another center to work behind Brook Lopez or another point guard to work beside Middleton, but these two players don't really fit the mold that I liked. So the C plus grade is necessary. Next, we have Minnesota, who I don't even know what to say, honestly. This is the biggest surprise of the all. I didn't expect Minnesota to really do too much, but the 2 first-round picks they got were both steals. I mean, first off, trading Rob Dillingham for 6th graders, middle schoolers in San Antonio's trade, insane. And the thing is, obviously, we can talk about the lack of defense that Dillingham put up. He actually had the lowest defense percentage of all NCAA players last year, but his offense is incredible. And that works the same way with Terrence Shannon Jr., who came this late first rounds, I think at 27, from Illinois. Great offensive power, lots of experience because he's older. Yeah, he has those controversies that didn't actually go anywhere, so he's honestly not that much of a liability off the court. But how this relates to Minnesota is that Minnesota obviously had the best defense in the country last year. We saw that full display taking down the Denver Nuggets, but the offense was lacking. You just can't rely on Anthony Edwards or Carlton Towns or Naz Reid all the time, which means you kind of need to use other offensive players, even if they lack defense. So I see where Minnesota's going with this. Obviously, defense would have been nice if they had a second pick for that, but getting two good offensive players is not a bad choice. So an A is necessary. Next, we have the New Orleans Pelicans, which I'm giving a B plus to. This is not too big in my opinion. Yves Messi was expected to be picked at 21 in replacement for Jonas Valanciunas, who went to the Wizards. Complete waste, in my opinion, for Valanciunas' sake. But Messi does fit in really, really well to this roster, so that's the good part. Antonio Reeves doesn't really, though. Antonio Reeves had a really disappointing season at Kentucky. He could have been a top 10 pick, a lottery pick, even a few months back. But his fall off, honestly, his fall off needs to be studied. But I just don't see him really fitting into that culture. Does this mean the team gets any better? Probably not. The team doesn't really get much worse though, because Valanciunas is uh, leaving for Messi doesn't really change too much. Expect him to be in the plan next year, even with DeJounte Murray. New York Knicks, another bomb draft. Who would have thought? It's not Kevin Knox, but it's not much better. And we're mostly going to talk here about Kome Dadier, who didn't really fill any roles necessarily to get a first round pick, but I guess that's where New York really saw it. And considering that they also had two first round picks when they traded with Washington for really nothing, in my opinion, wasn't really the best idea as well because they could have picked up somebody else. However, they did get Tyler Kolek, who does fill in a good role and was also should have been a first round pick. He will be an assist machine. Watch out for him in future years. He might average a double double. I mean that. And then lastly, the Knicks got the last pick in the draft in Ariel Laporte, who is a center, which they honestly could have used earlier. I know there were talks about Edie being there, Mezzi being there, but there really weren't any centers to take. So I guess last pick in the draft, he might as well. But also, he won't have any play on the team because, he's the last pick in the draft. And it sucks too because Mitchell Robinson isn't really the person to run the five the full time. And without Hardenstein, the center minutes are really going to be fractured. It's going to be probably the big losing point on this team, which sucks because the team really got good with this Mikal Bridges trade. Do I expect the draft to really help them with this? Probably not. But in all reality, the draft really didn't hurt them either. So a B minus. Next, we have OKC, which honestly deserved another B minus. I'm not a really big fan of these draft picks. Nikola Topic, he was injured. Is he even going to play? I mean, even if he does, what minutes will he get? The team is very stacked as it is, and his position doesn't really provide much. Could he do well in the G League and push himself in future years? Probably, and that's probably the best. Same thing with Dylan Jones from Weber State. Great 3-point shooter. A lot like Damian Lillard. I've seen the comparisons before. He does play well. He probably won't be a starter at any point in his career, but his bench minutes on the team in future years can be really, really handy. And that would be the same thing with AJ Mitchell from UC Santa Barbara. I think he definitely could play a good role with the three ball for both actually players, and even Topic is a good 3-point player as well. But I think the team really needs some more defense. The team kind of lacks that, which kind of hurts them as well. And playing a center behind um, Chet Holmgren would have been really nice. They had a couple centers they could have taken, but they chose not to, which is fine. I just don't really like any of these choices. I think more height would have been necessary to make this a better draft. Hey guys, Orlando did not draft a guard this year. Instead, they drafted power forward Tristan Silva from Colorado. And honestly, though, I don't think this changes too much. The team really didn't need him. The guard play obviously wasn't necessary either, but where he fits in with the roster with Franz Wagner and actually Moritz Wagner too, doesn't really put in much. He was a good player at Colorado. The team did really, really well for where they are standing wise. And Could he fit that role well in the NBA? Probably, but I don't expect him to get too many minutes or even make the starting five at any point this season. Now, Philly, you won. I'll be real with you. Philly typically doesn't do well with drafts. We all know about that. But this year, they actually predicted and made a good draft. First, getting Jared McCain at lottery. Once again, should not have left the lottery, but he really, really was necessary for this team. This team has no three-point shooting other than Nick Batum. And you can't get Nick Batum to shoot threes all the time. So getting Jared McCain is a huge, huge win. And Adam Bona in the second round works perfectly well with Joel Embiid in the background. He fits an incredible role that, once again, like the Jokic and De'Aaron Holmes choice, leaves Joel Embiid to sit on the bench and get the rest time he needs to avoid these injuries. Because Joel is getting injured a little bit too much for Philly's liking, and that hurts the season like it did last season. If you do have that scenario, putting in Ambona, who is shorter but can crash the glass in an amazing efficiency, will skyrocket the 76ers' chances of getting a top 5 seed, which they desperately need to finally crack the conference finals and give Joel Embiid that honorary welcome to being a good player type of thing. Because at the end of the day, we're getting rid of that MVP if he doesn't make the conference finals. Next is, well, the Phoenix Suns, who were part of that trade with the Denver Nuggets, who ended up getting an additional second-round pick from it, and also getting Ryan Dunn in the first round, who is arguably the best defender in this draft. Ryan Dunn has an incredible defensive strength for a team that does not have any of it. Phoenix did not have a single sense of defense during that series with the Timberwolves, and that cost them everything. You don't really need offense on that team. You already have Devin Booker, you already have Bradley Beal, you already have Kevin Durant. You need a guy like Ryan Dunn to fit that mold. And then second round, they picked up Oso Ighodaro, who can play center behind Bol. That's a good choice as well. He had a great time catching lobs for Tyler Kolek and continue to do that later on with the Suns. And then late second round, they picked up Kevin McCullough Jr. from Kansas, who does have those injury concerns, which I get why he was drafted so late for. But his potential is sky high for the guy. He could really fit into the roster a few years down the line after like KD retires or Bradley Beal retires, and he could really like push in that sort of guard play that Phoenix could also use in future years. Next, we have Portland, who technically did have 2 lottery picks. They traded that for Denny Avdija, which is part of this, so they do get a really good point because Denny's a great player, and trading with Malcolm Brogdon wasn't really that big of a loss in the 14th pick as well. And then with the 7th pick, though, they made the good choice. They chose Donovan Clingan as their center. Amazing choice. We all know how Donovan Clingan played well into March Madness, winning the championship for the back-to-back for Connecticut. I guess the only confusing part of this is where does DeAndre Ayton sit? Is DeAndre Ayton really going to go from the number 1 pick in 2018 to a backup to a freshman? It's hard to really say how things go. But this is overall a good pick for the Trailblazers, who are trying to avoid being that 15th seed in the West. I don't think it'll change too much, but this is a great start for the team. Next, we have the Kings, who picked Devin Carter from Providence. And honestly, if we were saying to ignore the DeMar DeRozan trade, which will probably put him out of the starting 5, Carter would have been a top 5 player for Rookie of the Year. I have seen this man's play style from Providence consistently. He was Player of the Year on a team that didn't even make the tournament over UConn, Creighton, all these other Big East teams, Marquette, that pushed themselves in, and yet somehow he was the best player in that great conference. It's hard to ignore his strengths. Incredible three-point shooting, incredible bag, his dribbling, his style. It's Kyrie Irving-esque. It's hard to ignore him. The fact that he fell this late into the lottery is almost a surprise. I just wish he had those starting minutes, but the DeMar DeRozan trade probably won't do too much of a difference, and he'll fit into the roster pretty well. The team has great backup players, and he can be one of them. And then we go to the Spurs, who, honestly, I hate to say it, the Spurs disappointed me in this draft. They had, once again, two top 10 picks. They traded for really nothing, in my opinion. They do get Stephon Castle, so they keep the B grade. Stephon Castle, obviously, once again, another great choice out of UConn. He definitely fits that mold that the Spurs need. But with the Chris Paul trade now, and he won't even be a starter, so I don't even know if this will really matter this year. And in the second round, the Spurs picked up two actually pretty well proven players in Juan Nunez from Spain and Harrison Ingram, who played multiple years at North Carolina. And honestly, they both have good upsides. So I could see them working their way into the roster in future years alongside one. So this is not the worst trade. It's just not giving any immediate impact. And next we have the Toronto Raptors, who picked up actually four players. I think this is the most players the draft got for one team. And honestly, the A plus is well deserved. Jacoby Walter at 17, not well talked about, but Baylor always produces great players. Davian Mitchell, last year in Keontae George. And right now with Jacoby Walter, you can play an incredibly strong point guard if you need to, forward position. His choice, I feel. And that Baylor team is stacked. It's hard to ignore. And I think he's going to fit pretty well. After that, they went and got Jonathan Mogbo in the second round, the first pick from San Francisco, and he honestly has a great upside too. And I think he really wasn't talked about because he went to San Francisco, which is not a big school for basketball. Obviously, we all know Bill Russell went there, but he definitely fits a mold that really isn't seen. He is 6'6", but plays like a center because his wingspan is 7'2". And you want a person to play that position, play him like the Toronto Raptors play him, because you're not going to have a great center right now. The center right now is what, Kelly Olynyk. You're really not getting anything much, and they didn't draft anybody crazy for the center. That would be Ulrich Chomch in the second round, which didn't really provide much. He's not really going to finish the roster at any point. But for Mogbo, he can fit in almost immediately, and I think if anything, he might be the best player they drafted of the four. And that is saying Jamal Shead as well, who's also drafted mid-second round. Probably the second best defensive player in this draft. I think he really fits a good size and range. Yeah, he's only 6'2", so he won't really get much minutes, but he really fits a defensive point guard play that we don't really see. We see a lot of offensive point guards. He plays a defensive point guard. Something that Toronto could also use on a team full of RJ Barretts and Emmanuel Quicklys, who aren't really defensive maniacs like he is. So in all reality, the A minus is well deserved. They get good. Next is the Utah Jazz, who they won this draft. I won't say anything else. They won this draft. 3 good steals. His team has made a core in the 2024 draft. I mean that. Let's start off with 10. Cody Williams from Colorado. Like his brother Jalen Williams, great upside. You will see him for multiple years going into the future with how he plays. Isaiah Collier at 29. 29. The number one prospect from high school last year was 29 in the next draft. Insane to see that even happen. And yes, Collier did not have a good season. USC didn't even make the tournament. They didn't have a winning record. But his play style is great. His turnovers are a problem, don't get me wrong. But his play style, his shooting, his point of 3 and D, incredible. Incredible steal. He will work so well besides the older players in Clarkson and the rest of the roster. And then behind Markkanen, you could put in Kyle Filipowski, a second rounder that should not have been a second rounder. He was invited to the green room too. Only player that was, and that went to the second round. And yeah, we can talk about the controversies with his concerning girlfriend, but that's not really for this episode. If anything, though, Filipowski had a great sophomore season, like his freshman season at Duke, and really, really works the 3 ball well as a center, power forward, what he wants to play with. His wingspan is a concern. It's not even 7 foot for a 6'11" man, but his upside does work well on the team and can really be pushed for deep bench play because that's what Utah is missing. Utah is really one good bench away from being in the playoffs. As long as they keep Lauri Markkanen, the team can really stay focused with this draft class as their young core. And then lastly was another really good steal for the team, and that's Washington Wizards, building another really good core for themselves. Obviously, getting Alex Sarr at 2 is insane. He was not supposed to be here. He was supposed to be number 1. He was supposed to be anything else. This is the rookie of the year. This is completely the rookie of the year. He's been giving everything he needs to be the best player from this draft for years to come. He is easily being built core around him with Bub Carrington at 14, and then Keyshawn George is the third first round pick. Washington stole this draft. My only issue is that the guard play from Keyshawn George and Bub Carrington is not insane. Bub Carrington doesn't really have the level of defense that I would have liked for a team that is now losing Denny Avdija and getting Malcolm Brogdon, who does add some defense, but doesn't really fit into the picture because of where the starting lineup is heading. Now, does this really mean much for Wes Unseld when he does set up the team more for coming years? Maybe. But I could definitely see a team built around these three players making it into the playoffs in future years behind possibly Cooper Flagg or BJ Edcombe from this next 2025 draft. Expect this team to be under radar in future years because of these three picks. So, how'd you like this draft? You thought it was good? You thought it was mid? Honestly, everyone's saying it's mid. I don't fully see it. I think the draft had a lot of good guard and role players like we've seen. I like Stephon Castle. I like Alex Sarr. I kind of like Nikola Topic. I didn't really talk too much about it, but I genuinely enjoyed how he played. And if anything, I think this draft class can go into the future and we can look back on it 5, 10 years from now and say, we really missed out on something great. But anyway, thanks for joining us. I'm once again Josh from the Basketball Boys podcast. We will be releasing more episodes later on this month. Catch you all next time.